All right, so we are now recording. And so what I wanted to do really quickly is I don't know if you all know each other, and there's some that I don't know, some of you I don't know on here. I was going to see if you would just maybe share your name, your district, school, your role, one thing about you that you've grown in or developed or have even learned since this COVID has happened this last year. So this will just give us a chance to get to know each other and just quickly where we're all located. Is there anybody that would want to go next to just quickly share? We'll just do a quick whip around.
I'll go. Can you hear me?
Yep.
My name is Sue Hart. I'm the school counselor at Central and Junior Senior High School down in Halsey. And what else did you want to know? My role, school counselor. One thing I've grown in, developed, or learned since the start of COVID, that isolation is not really a good thing. And one of the areas I've grown is we're a small school district and we use everything that we have as a resource. I became a teaching resource, so I actually am teaching now. So I'm learning all this fun technology, which is why I'm using you guys as a guinea pig, testing my new microphone for Zoom so I can walk around my room and talk to my students, and it's working. Yay!
Thank you, Sue. Anybody next?
Beth, I'll go next. My name is Erin Nichols. I'm the program associate for the school counseling department for Salem-Keizer School District. And one of the things that I've grown in, developed, or learned since the start of COVID is I am not a technology person, but due to COVID, I have learned, with my partner, Christina Lilly, she has really helped me out a lot. So I appreciate that.
Thank you, Erin.
So I'll go next. And I'm Christina Lilly. I'm the other half of Erin at Salem-Keizer. And I was also going to say a technology thing, and now I feel like it's been done. But I thought that I knew a lot more about technology than I actually do. And so it's been fun kind of learning and also teaching, Erin and some of our counselors. It's just been a whole growth experience, I would say.
Thank you,
I can
Christina.
go. I'm Tiffany Schaefer. I'm at Centennial School District. I'm the 8th grade counselor at the one and only middle school we have there. I don't know if it's something I've learned, but more that I've come to appreciate just how collaborative you need to be and lean on each other for resources. And I see Chris down at the bottom, but just how important having that partner within the school is.
Thank you, Tiffany.
I'll jump in. I'm Jennifer Spencer-Imes. I'm an assistant superintendent with Westland Wilsonville School District. And one of the most fun things I get to do is support our amazing school counselors. And I'm going to say I've always wanted to learn to play the piano. And when COVID started, I downloaded an app. And I'm no maestro, but I can do some songs now that brings me some joy. And it's been also a good, just like analyzing the learning and how hard it is to learn new skills. And that's kept me kind of thinking about the grit of a lot of our students that are going through a lot to stay learning.
Great, thank you, Jennifer.
I'll go. I'm Sarah Linnertz, high school counselor in Newburgh School District. I think I'm new to this group. I'm not sure if Newburgh has had a person participate in this group in a while. Not sure if it's a new learning, but just something that is really refreshing is the distance has made our high school students really value school, which is, it's nice to hear them. It's kind of bittersweet, but how much they miss school and want to come back to school. I'm just curious to see what happens over the next couple of years in like a shift in maybe behavior and attitude. I guess I've also liked being able to do Google Meets with parents at whatever time works best for either of us. Like that it's really hard for parents to come into schools sometimes. And so being able to just jump on a Google Meet, that access, I hope we don't go away from that. And then our district also gave all of us Google Voice numbers. And so I can, now I can text all of my students, and I love that because they're way more responsive that way. So that has been a plus side that I hope once we go back to our traditional school years, I don't want those two things taken away. So
Great,
yeah.
thank you, Sarah. This is our first meeting, so Newburgh has not missed any of our meetings, but we hope that you'll continue to join for each of the future ones. Is there anybody else that would go next?
Sure, I'll go next. I'm Anya Hirschberger, and I support the Hillsborough School District Early College Program. And I also support high school options and secondary counseling systems. And this year, I think I'm just reminded about the importance of, especially when our communication is mostly electronic, of just stopping and, we can get really distracted with go when we're doing emails all day and communicating in that way, but to stop and find a connection with people, whether it's a phone call or just a, hey, how's it going on that Google Meet, has just been so important. So it's been good.
Anybody else?
Sure, I'll just leap in here. I'm James Charles, Program Director and Student Services from Gresham Barlow School District. I support all things counseling and social work and mental health and many other things in special education and all of that goodness. Things I've learned, one of the things I've learned since the start of COVID was how much time I spent driving from school to different meetings, and how much time I guess I'm saving by this launching of virtual meetings. Which is to say, I guess busy people just get busier. Yeah, that's been a nice learning.
I'm Deb Miller, and I'll jump in after James since I'm literally his next door neighbor in districts, and I'm in Reynolds School District. I'm supporting special education and school counseling and social working right now. We're hoping to bring on an additional staff member to help take on some of that work. And with James, I have really appreciated, and someone else mentioned that Zoom has actually been an efficiency piece, and we've had more parent engagement in some things because they can hop onto a link instead of have to physically go someplace. So I hope we hold on to that efficiency and that added place for parents to access information about their kids.
Thank you, Deb.
I'll go next. My name is Gloria Hull, and I work for Gresham Barlow School District with James. And my title is a counselor on special assignment. And I think what I've learned, I've actually been trying to think of, there's lots of lessons learned. What I'll share is that I think I really continue to value in-person interactions, although I've seen a lot of growth and collaboration online. I really value that and hope to return to that.
Thank you, Gloria. I see some others that could introduce themselves.
I'll go. Roberto Aguilar, counselor at Milwaukee High School, also OSCA president-elect. And what I value that we have time to go more in depth, because there's not a bell and there's not someone at your door. So we have some time to go in depth with some folks that we can connect with, and time to be innovative. That's been the part that I've enjoying the most, because there's a lot to not enjoy.
I'll go next. I work with Roberto, so it's good to see you, Roberto. I'm Michael Rawls, Director of Social Services at the North Clackamas School District, and I think learning to appreciate the small things. Losing electricity for 3 days last week, learning to appreciate like the coffee maker, and just the little things like that, heat, and other things, really put you in the position to appreciate those things. So, and that's been happening for me all during COVID, I'd say. The interactions with people, with kids, the positives about how we've been getting together more easily with kids and those kinds of things. I also did my first Venmo yesterday, sent money to a friend. So there you go. Thanks.
I'll go. My name is Rhonda Gatewood, and I'm a school counselor at Witch Hazel Elementary in Hillsborough. I've also been on the OSCA board with a bunch of other people on this meet. And what I have valued the most this year is, even though I've felt very distant from students, I've felt very close with my counselor colleagues in the last year as we've gotten together on Google Meets and collaborated a lot more than we ever have before, and have just really valued those relationships and what I've learned from my peers.
Thank you, Rhonda.
If I'll go next. First, thank you for pulling this team together. I think it'll be fun learning from each other. My name is Jim Bowen. I am the Executive Director of Middle Schools in Bend the Pines School District, and I also get to supervise and help support our counselors in our district. Something I've learned probably isn't new learning, but it's a painful reminder that I don't have a lot of answers. So what I've learned in COVID is that really the team is what makes the district. It's not one person. So there's a lot of things that we've had to create, even after being in education for a lot of years. And I've learned that the best way to do that is through working with each other.
Thank you, Jim.
I'll go next. My name is Caleb Solomon. I'm the counseling TOSA for the Eugene 4J School District. I think one of the things I've learned is just, someone else mentioned earlier, the efficiency of Zoom. I've been super impressed just with the efficiency by which I've been able to work with my counselors, but also like their ability to work together and collaborate and problem solve over Zoom has been super impressive.
Thank you, Caleb.
Oh, I'll jump in next. I'm Cassie Kenny. I'm the district coordinator of behavioral health and wellness for Forest Grove School District. I'd say one thing this school year, like a lot of you, I think it's virtual meeting facilitation, but even more than that, I think I've become much more intentional about my meeting facilitation and kind of forcing myself to put it on the agenda, to stop, take the time and check in before just jumping into content.
Thank you, Cassie. I see just a couple more people.
Hi, I'm Michelle Kim. I'm school counselor at Liberty High School with the Hillsborough School District. And I think one thing that I have actually valued even more this year than ever is just the communication. I thought our communication was great in the building, but being online, it's amazing how many different ways you need to communicate to make sure everybody gets on the same page. So I appreciate that and learned a lot.
I'll go next. I'm Kelly Boudry, and I'm a special programs administrator in Lincoln County School District on the coast. And with COVID and wildfires and everything that have hit our communities over the last year, I think one of the things that I've become more aware of and learned a lot more about is just connecting with those community resources to help support students and families. And we have 4 distinct cities within our district. So learning about each of those in all of the areas and then helping our schools to be able to connect to those resources so that schools aren't trying to do it alone has been a valuable lesson through COVID and other challenges. So.
Thank you, Kelly.
I'll go. My name is Teresa Dowdy. I'm a counselor at LeGrand High School. And I would say that I've learned a little more patience. I've learned to be pretty flexible, and I've learned how to be a little more creative with creating lessons and meetings and working with families and students and teachers.
Thank you, Teresa. Brooke, I think you were going to talk next.
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Brooke Nova. I'm the Director of Student Support Networks and Career and College Pathways for Hillsborough School District. To be really honest, I think the thing that I've learned the most is that the human condition and spirit is even more resilient than I ever thought before. I think about, it's been almost a year for us planning and doing all things related to COVID related for our community, and if someone would have told me that we were all going to be doing our jobs plus adapting and changing and modifying to make this work in a distance learning, I would have been like, this is crazy. But it really is the collective of not only, I think, internal staff, but also the community that circles around us has been so responsive to support as well. And it really just every day reminds me that we can do really hard things, even things that have never been done before.
Thank you, Brooke.
I can go. I jumped on a little bit late after you guys were getting started. I'm Chris O'Connor. I work with Tiffany at Centennial Middle School. I think we're talking about what we value or what we appreciate. I've been able to get a puppy who's a big pain in the butt due to COVID and being home, but he definitely brings some joy around. And just the collaboration and the freedom that being virtual does lend, which is not always great for students, but the collaboration, being able to be at 5 different locations all in one day and not having to say no to something because of travel time or things, I think is one sort of silver lining.
Thank you, Chris. Is there any other districts that are here that haven't shared? No. Okay, we have some ODE folk that are on the call. Do you want to just quickly tell who you are and your title?
Sure, I'll go first. I'm Angie Foster Lawson. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the sexuality education analyst at ODE. I'm half-time supporting sexuality education implementation. And I've really appreciated the adaptation of our teacher trainings to be virtual. It's just, there's a lot we can do and there's a lot more people we can reach with travel time as well. I appreciate that comment. Thanks.
Thank you, Angie.
Jim Taylor, ODE, he, him, his pronouns, and I work with the career technical education team, specifically focused around career exploration and guidance, not only in the CTE area, but across all pre-kindergarten through post-graduate school opportunities.
Thank you, Jen.
Tina McHale, Community Wellness Advocate with the Safe and Inclusive Schools team at ODE.
Hi, Tina. Thank you.
I guess it's me, huh?
Grace, you're up.
Grace Bullock, Senior Mental Health Strategist at ODE, and on the same team as Tina, and work very closely with Beth. And just to answer your questions, Beth, what I've learned is just the amazing amount of work that's going on across the state in this space and all the work that you do, which I think, you know, when we're working at such a distance, it's hard to really understand and grasp it. And also just how fortunate we've been in spite of COVID to be able to facilitate meetings like this, which would have historically required us all to travel somewhere. And so we actually get to meet and build community across the state because we're able to do this. So that's been the one of several silver linings for me.
Thank you, Grace. And thank you for being willing to share with the group today. I'm going to share my screen. There's just a couple things that I wanted to go over before we hear from Grace. So can you all see the slides? Thumbs up just real quick. Jim, if you can see the slide. Okay, thank you. Okay, so just the purpose of bringing us together was I was hearing from districts. I get quite a few questions from individual districts, individual counselors in districts, and I really wanted to provide an opportunity for leads to come together to hear from ODE around information, guidance, resources, unpack what those are, get the information that you need in order to be able to respond to people that are in schools needing support, but also for you to learn from each other. I think that, you know, I have the information, I can point people to information, but I think you all hearing from each other is going to be essential to moving our state forward with comprehensive school counseling programs. So I just feel like this is a really great opportunity for you all to hear from ODE, but also from each other. So this is also opportunity to ask questions, address your needs. This is really about you and for you. So I want to tailor this as we go and adapt and improve and really give you what you need so that you come to these meetings like you feel like you've left with what you need. Also, it's the collaborative time for us to learn, share, and network with each other. And then so I sent out the survey to get feedback so that we can plan and tailor these meetings to what you need. So what came out as most pressing and what was most interested from you all was the covering the topics of ODE's integrated mental health model. So that's why we're going to hear from Grace in just a moment. Also, suicide prevention, Addie's Act was a really big one. And then around all students belong, in particular, it was the equity, access, inclusion was of interest, but that is wrapped under some of these other topics that we're going to cover for the next few planned meetings that are up and coming. So those are already, we have people that are going to present from ODE on those topics. So we'll be able to cover that information for you. What I heard from you all wanting from ODE and also from each other was around equity, access, and inclusion. And so the plan is to embed that throughout our conversations, throughout our presentations. So we're going to make sure that that is kind of core to what we are holding within our meeting. Also, legislative updates was important, and that's legislative sessions going on right now. So I would like to hear from you all if you want that information during our meetings, or if you would like that outside of our meetings, that I can just send you information of the bills that ODE is tracking and which ones are particularly focused for comprehensive school counseling programs. I can do that. So just let me know in the chat if you'd rather have that separate, or if you want time to discuss legislative updates. I will follow that in the chat and review what your comments are for that decision. Also, another big topic was hearing about comprehensive school counseling program implementation and improvement. That was not only from ODE, but also from each other. That's another great opportunity to hear about some of the great programs that are happening around the state, whether that's at district level or school level. I think we have some exemplars, and it would be great for you all to hear from each other around that. And I'm also happy to share out from ODE. And then some other things for the survey feedback was around the sharing of resources, promising practices, and strategies with each other, and aligning practices across districts. I know that some districts that are close to each other like to kind of hear what each other's doing as you are planning. And so I think this is an opportunity for you to hear that from each other and have some discussions. And maybe it might inform, or you might get ideas. The other thing was parent community communication strategies. So that will be something that we'll come back to, and advocacy around students' roles and programming. So we'll also come back to that. And then the career pathways through awareness exploration programs. And so those are some things that we will be covering in our meetings. Is there any questions about just kind of what we're going to include? There was also some like medium response interest of topics. And so if we can fit those in, I'd love to do that. Is there anything of these you have questions on? No, okay. So today's topic is going to be Dr. B. Grace Bullock. She's, as she introduced herself, the senior mental health strategist for Oregon Department of Education. She's going to go over ODE's integrated model for mental health and the toolkit. We are looking at time, and it looks like we might not be able to get in depth to the district discussion. So we'll kind of adapt. I think Grace is really good at adapting, and so we'll make that work. But I'm going to hand it over to Grace so she can go ahead and start to go into her pieces. So I'm going to stop sharing. And Grace, do you want to take over?
Thanks, Beth. Yeah, I'm going to share my screen, and just hopefully I will be able to organize this so I can see you all at the same time I'm talking.
And I apologize. I know I was talking fast to go over things. I just want to make sure that Grace has time to talk to you all, because I know she's the one that you were really interested in hearing from. So Grace, take it away.
All right. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
All right. I'm just trying to get it to. Come on, computer. There you go. All right. Well, thank you so much, Beth, for inviting our team, and thank you so much, everyone, for joining. I just want to preface this by saying, as Beth mentioned, this is just the very first in a bunch of offerings. So I'm here today just to provide some overall grounding around the work, but we will be back and there will be plenty more opportunities for asking questions and unpacking resources. So in the short amount of time I have, I'm just going to do some really high level broad overview, but there's an open invitation in our team to always reach out, and we're happy to engage with you or work through Beth to find ways to support you. So my task today is to talk a little bit about ODE's integrated model of mental health. And I wanted to, lead by saying that, you are all working in these spaces and this is all the work that you are doing. So the ODE's intention when creating this model was not to, come in with some top-down strategy saying, here's the model, you must follow it, but to use it as a framework for conversation and to look at this and see how you feel that your work is represented in this model. And so that's the ongoing conversation that we're hoping to have with you, and to really think about what does this model look like in practice? How is it, how can it be applied in your work? And more importantly, how can we support you in your work so that this model makes sense and also that it's of benefit to all of the school communities that you're serving? So that's the general intention. And the other thing I learned is that I'm not as good on Zoom as I thought I was. All right, so where we started was that, and I'm preaching the choir here, but historically in education, a lot of content areas related to mental and behavioral health have been treated separately. So there's a lot of energy in the state around social emotional learning and how social emotional learning can be used to support health education and mental health along a multi-tiered system support framework. There's been a lot of work in pilots and other things, initiatives around trauma-informed principles and practices. There is a growing movement in the state to make sure that we're centering equity, racial equity in all of our work to make sure that our communities have equal access to services. And I'm speaking more specifically to health and mental health. And there's been a strong commitment on the part of you and the state to make sure that what we're doing is strengths-based and we're really focusing on honoring the ways of being and knowing of school communities and really representing that well. So part of the problem with doing this work in a segmented fashion is that, for example, social emotional learning principles and practices and the way and the pedagogies and how social emotional learning shows up in education isn't always necessarily trauma informed. And it isn't always informed by principles of equity or racial equity. And in some cases, it's delivered in ways that are more deficit-based than strengths-based, if you can believe that. Sometimes trauma-informed principles and practices have been delivered without thinking about or accounting for social emotional learning principles. And again, maybe not equity-centered. So part of the work of our team and part of the reason why our team was created was to reflect ODE's very intentional commitment to begin to focus on health and mental health as being one of the cornerstones of education. So this was the very first model trying to articulate what that might look like. And then since the first model was developed in April, we've iterated it out and had a lot of community engagement and engagement within the agency to begin to try to unpack this and see what it looks like and sounds like and feels like in practice. So this is the full version of the model. And I want to draw your attention first to this bottom strip in gray. So even though ODE recognizes that mental health, which encompasses all aspects of health the way we're framing it, is really central to making sure that all members of school communities thrive. And by that, I mean, if the mental health needs of staff and families and students and leaders are not, and you are not attended to, then it becomes very difficult for everyone in the community to thrive. It becomes very difficult for students to learn if their basic needs are met. So even though mental health is centered in this model, it really occurs along this continuum of care, because as you know, if we're not attending to basic physiological needs, it's really hard to focus on mental health or learning. So physiological needs are paramount, as are safety and security. And as we've learned, in particular relief during COVID, relationships, connections, community, all of these things are also very necessary in order to promote and maintain mental health, as are a sense of purpose and agency and self-efficacy. And all of these things are required in order to reach a point of self-actualization. That is a term I don't like, by the way. So I have a running a running offer to anyone who can find a better term. You get the prize if you email me and get one that we can use. Please do, because this is just a running thing with me. But that is a, you know, a la Maslow and wherever he got it from. So that's kind of the term in use. But just know that that's not our favorite. And there goes Zoom again. Sorry, let's see if I can get this to work. Come on, Zoom. There we go. So just really quickly to walk through the model, and it's somewhat self-explanatory, particularly for those of you that are working in these spaces, but I'm going to start up here. And again, the reason why these appear in this sort of overlapping Venn diagram is our way of articulating the fact that we see all of these pieces as being equally important and equally necessary in order to promote mental health. And so none is elevated above the other, and we are working and hoping to make sure that that is articulated in all of the work that we do and in how we support you. So I'm sure you're all familiar with trauma-informed principles and practices. We have added a few things to the traditional offerings, including the need for food and shelter, which we know is tremendously important, but then also safety, security, collaboration, voice choice, transparency, trustworthiness, etc. So, and of course, supportive relationships. What you will start to notice as I begin to talk about these things is there is a tremendous amount of overlap, which is good because the uniting of all of these various, you know, previously siloed areas is not as daunting as it seems because there is so much commonality among the models. So the second piece is social emotional learning driven. We've added a few of our own departmental values to this. So you're probably familiar with the typical SEL content: self-awareness, relationship skills, social awareness, healthy decision-making, and self-regulation. But we also see things like health and sex education being extremely seminal to this work, as is cultural identity development. And I would also venture, although it's not on this model, environmental education, because we're seeing more and more data coming out linking the relationship between what students are learning about climate change and their mental health. And so there are a lot of different ways that this can show up in educational spaces. So the third, and not in any order of priority, is that the work be equity centered. So making sure, most importantly, that all members of the school community have access to culturally and linguistically responsive services and supports and providers. That we focus a lot on self-determination and elevating families' ways of being and knowing. Historically, so I'm a psychologist, and so historically I come from the work from a place where I was trained and acculturated to think about this work more as fixing what's broken rather than elevating what's there. And so we're really working to reframe that belief system so that we can pay more attention to drawing out the beautiful strengths that families and students have, rather than pointing to what's broken and creating this hierarchical dominance that we are the ones that are responsible for fixing it, because that actually does not promote mental health and well-being. It promotes dependency and actually can contribute to things like depression and anxiety. So again, all these pieces of equity-centered work are important. Recognition of biases, removing structural barriers that promote or support oppression, marginalization. So all of these things are really important when you think about what it takes to promote mental health in school communities. And last but not least, all of this work needs to be strengths-based. And I'm going to invite you, when you think about how you do the work in the world, and not from a lens of, self-punishment or criticism, but start thinking about how the language that you use and the way that you show up and the way you might think about assessment or intervention might be continuing to promote a narrative that isn't strengths-based. And it's not on you. We're trained in this model that tends to take strength and power and put it in the position of the people that are providing the services, which can often take that power and strength away from the people we're trying to serve inadvertently. So this is the big model. I apologize for racing through it. There's lots of time. We will. I know Beth already provided this to you. There's a downloadable version on the website, and I'll talk a little bit more about what we have to support this model as well. All right, so I noticed this on my last presentation. So the All Students Belong rule was passed last Thursday, and that is the rule that prohibits the display of Nazi symbols of hate, of the battle flag of the Confederacy, and nooses on school property. And the final passage of the bill is actually called, or the rule is actually called "Every Student Belongs." So if you see it in different forms, it's just because it's only been a couple days and we're slowly transitioning over. So the intention's the same, but the language is going to be slightly different. But this is the model, or sorry, this is the website that we built out to support a lot of this work, and it covers the content areas that our Safe and Inclusive Schools team is leading. So there's the mental health toolkit, which Beth mentioned, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about that. There's the model of mental health, which I just talked about. And Tina, would you mind throwing in the URL for this when you get a moment, please? So there's downloadable versions of both the toolkit and the model on the website for your pleasure and reading pleasure. We are just in the final processes of translating the mental health toolkit into Spanish. So that's been a big, believe me, the back translation is much worse than the translation, because we want to make sure that the spirit of the work is there, and that's harder to capture in a translation. So we're getting there. Mental health guidance and resources. Thank you, Tina. Mental health guidance and resources. There is a plethora of resources that have been created this year, and they're categorized under resources for students and families, for folks like you, for leaders, for mental health professionals, for all people supporting school communities. And some are translated, most are not, but they cover a wide range of topics, including suicide intervention, prevention, and postvention, what to do if you suspect abuse, substance use concerns. There's just a wealth of information there, so I invite you to take a look. There's information about our Strengthening Mental Health and Education initiative, which I won't talk about today, but that's an initiative that we are working with our partners at the Oregon Health Authority. And if you don't know, the Oregon Health Authority holds a lot of the responsibility for school-based mental health, either through contracts with community-based organizations, CCOs, et cetera, or through the school-based health centers. So there's a lot of overlap and a lot of partnering that we're doing with the Oregon Health Authority to make sure that what you see is seamless and integrated rather than disjointed, because it's coming from two different agencies. I know there was interest in Addie's Act and suicide prevention, and in the weeks to come, Kara Bulahanis, I believe, will be coming from our office, and maybe Jill Baker from the Oregon Health Authority to talk to you about that. There's some beautiful work going on in the school safety and prevention system, so that's another piece of work that our office is doing, and then the Every Student Belongs initiative. So there's just a ton of resources on this website. If you haven't had a chance to check them out, I invite you to. But I'm going to focus a little bit more today on the toolkit, because obviously it's great to have a model, but if you don't know what to do with it, it's essentially useless. So the toolkit is our initial offering to put some legs into this work and to provide resources to support you and school communities in implementing parts of this model. So the model, the model. So the toolkit, it also reflects the values around this model, which I'll talk about a little bit more. Some are redundant, and also has a very, very carefully curated resources that our team, Beth and OHA put together to support this work as well. So all of these things are living documents, living models, living resources. This is not just a one and done, which is why these conversations with you are so important, because we want to make sure that we're providing you with what you need and not just pumping out a bunch of guidance that won't be serving an important function for you. So again, I'm just going to quickly run through the values that are guiding this work that are articulated in the toolkit. The first, as I said, mental health, which we see as being really encompassing all aspects of health and well-being, are a cornerstone of education. Without health, it's very hard for anyone to thrive in any system. That again, health occurs along a continuum of care, so there are a lot of factors that need to be accounted for. And if you don't know this, there's a lot of national data that shows that schools are one of the primary providers of mental health services. So nationally, about 70% of kiddos get their contacts with mental health service provision somewhere within a school environment, whether it's the school proper, counselors, school-based health centers, but schools are really hubs of mental health for students and for families. So you are doing amazing work, and you are holding a lot in terms of making sure that students have access regardless of what role you're serving. So again, the real value that's driving this work is focusing on health promotion. It's not focusing on diagnoses, labeling, although those are necessary in order to identify need. The focus is not on the diagnosis, the label, the tier, but really on promoting and elevating the strengths that people come to the table with, and then trying to magnify those strengths. So our outreach has really reinforced the importance of centering the work and celebrating the ways of being and knowing of our communities, and taking time to really learn what those are, rather than making assumptions based on the white dominant culture model, which has been the modus operandi for a long time. Again, supported by 4 equally important pillars of practice, strengths-based, and a real commitment to centering on collaboration, equity, flexibility, and perhaps most importantly, meeting people where they are. And just to be clear, I come to this having been a provider, and I could imagine sitting there hearing all this and kind of going, what are you kidding? I mean, there are only so many hours in the day. You've got a lot of students that you're serving. How can you be there and show up for every single one? So it's not so much, trying to create an expectation that's not realistic, but using values to guide the work so that we can do the best we can, given the circumstances that we're working under. So last but not least, I wanted to talk a little bit about what the key components of this toolkit are. And again, I know Beth sent the toolkit in advance, so I apologize if you've already read it, but I'll be brief. The toolkit is really, again, focused on leading with the need to elevate strength and focus on strength, and come to the work with everyone in the school community from a place of strength. The second piece, and I think it's one of the most important components of the toolkit, is talking about addressing traumatic stress. In our world, I'll say that because I think it's fairly broad, we have an understanding, particularly now that we're in a global pandemic, that trauma is occurring, and trauma does have significant bearing on people's ability to cope, people's ability to, the fact that people are experiencing a lot of traumatic stress. So trauma is real. The concern that we have is that there are a lot of places where the conversation seems to be focused on trauma. And by that, I mean, there's an assumption that everybody who experiences trauma will be traumatized. And therefore we're treating everyone as though they've been traumatized, which inadvertently, I believe, negates the fact that there are many people who experience one or more traumatic events that do just well, that thrive, that have the resources, that have the social support, that have what they need online in order to support themselves and continue to be healthy and well. So focusing on traumatic stress actually creates more of a deficit-based mindset than a strengths-based mindset. And in all reality, the research shows that only a small percentage of people that experience a traumatic event go on to develop PTSD, and that, you know, traumatic stress is real and we need to know how to identify it. But if we assume that people are traumatized, we might be missing what they are bringing to the table and how they are adapting in ways that are functional for them. So a lot more there. We can unpack that whenever you want, but there's some of that written in. Elevating student voice. Again, this is tremendously important, particularly when you think about trauma-informed principles and practices. How do we create spaces for students to tell us truly what they need? How do we make sure that we are, you know, focusing on the impact and not just the intention? How do we make sure that students are telling us what they need, but also that we're creating a safe space for them to communicate that? Not just students, but also families and staff. Again, centering equity, racial equity, and anti-racism is very important to this work. There's some beautiful resources there. I'm just mindful of the time now, so I'm going to speed up a bit. And promoting inclusive school environments. One of the reasons why this work is so important is that if people do not feel safe, if people do not feel like they're belonging and valued and heard and appreciated in a school context, it is going to affect their mental health. So how do we create context where everybody in a school community feels as though they're equally valued? Again, I'm not a Pollyanna, I'm very much a pragmatist, but this is a really important value to have as a North Star in our work, to make sure that we're considering the ways in which how our school communities might be causing harm and undermining health just by the way they may even be structured. And last but not least, and I'm sure you are all very familiar with multi-tiered systems of support. So how do all of these pieces of work show up in MTSS? And again, we're fairly early on in this process. We are just beginning. We had a lot of meetings about the model last year, but now we're in this place of working across the agency, but also with you to really explore, what does this look like? What does this look like, sound like, feel like? What does this look like in practice? What do you need? Is this a realistic model? Is there something missing? Is it confusing? So that's the place that we are now, which is why I'm really grateful that you showed up for this meeting, because this gives us an opportunity to learn from you. And hopefully we can begin an ongoing dialogue with you, if you're willing. It's always an invitation to partner with us in thinking through how this will be applied in the real world. So with that, I believe we have 8 minutes left, unless you have a closing, Beth. So I'm going to toss it back to you to facilitate a discussion.
Yeah,
I'm going to take, just one quick thing. I'm going to take this off of screen share so you can see each other, if that's okay. And you kind of got these questions. I know that Beth sent a variation of these around. So I'm going to, can you see each other now?
Yes.
Are we back? Okay.
Grace, maybe what might be helpful, is there any quick way to plop the questions in the chat?
I would, I am not having good luck with that these days. I would have to type them in, but I will type them in while, let me see if I can get this out here. I'll type them in while you're asking questions. How's that?
Sounds good. Actually, I think I found them. I'm going to put the questions in the chat just to kind of help guide responses. Grace, I think mine might be a little bit different than yours that I sent out, but that's all right.
I fudged them. I actually shrunk them down because I knew we were probably going to be short on time. But It's okay.
This rest of the time is for you all to respond to questions, for Grace to answer questions, and other people from ODE that are on that can help answer some of the questions around the model and the toolkit. Grace had these specific questions if any district was wanting to share. So we could go through number one. So what about the model? What is it that you like? Is there anything missing that you're seeing within the model? I saw somebody's response. Cassie had actually used the model for a presentation with her school board last week and found it really helpful.
Yeah, I can jump in really quick about that. In our district, we're doing a lot of work around just the overlap between our equity work and our behavioral health and wellness work. And I think having that as kind of the centering slide that started my presentation to the school board last week was really helpful, as opposed to thinking about trauma-informed practices or skills-based or strengths-based or equity, all as different components, that they all come together as part of one continuum of what we would call behavioral health and wellness in district. So thank you. I appreciated that.
Oh, thank you for the feedback. When this first came out, we were trying, maybe foolhardily, we were trying to provide coaching because we were hearing from folks like you that, how do I bring this to my district? What do I do? What does it look like? And so that's why these are great opportunities. And thank you, Cassie. I'd love to hear online or offline how it went and what you also received in terms of feedback. So maybe we can connect on email. I'll put my email in the chat if you have the time and want to let me know. I'd be really interested.
Great.
I shared that same slide with our community partners last week. And my wondering, is there a plan to share something similar in visual with county partners that also serve youth in different venues, or because I know this, is shared through Oregon Department of Education, but more as like a state representation of what overall comprehensive health and wellness could look like in a partnership. Because I love the continuum piece. That's actually why I use that slide, is kind of that ongoing continuum. I'm just wondering, are other audiences also getting this information as well?
Excellent question. And the answer is yes, but counties weren't one of them. So never even occurred to me, go figure. We're doing a lot of this work with OHA, and OHA is doing a lot of work within the counties, but it never occurred to me that they might be a really good place to also be having this conversation. And I do have friends and contacts and work in our local county advisory board. So thank you for that, Brooke. We'll bring that back to the team and have a conversation about it. Yes, by the way, if we can, we will.
Brooke, I think something that you just mentioned too addresses number 4. So who needs to be at the table, not necessarily from districts, but maybe who was missed. So I think that's really helpful. Thank you for that. I know we only have 2 minutes left. Grace, is there any of these that you really want to hear from today, or can we roll some of these over for next time we meet?
Yeah, absolutely. I understand, 1, we went quickly. 2, it's a lot of information to absorb. So if you're kind of sitting here going, I have no idea what to say, you're not alone. This is not unusual. So we'll definitely be back and continue to have this conversation, but would appreciate if you take the time to kind of play with this, unpack it, think about it, and then come back and give us feedback. We don't bite, I promise. So yeah, it'd be lovely to know what how this works for you or doesn't.
So maybe just finishing with number 1, is there anything that's just missing that you noticed within the model?
Maybe this isn't the right question, but we've been really trying to unpack the ASCA national model. And so I'm just because this is specifically, this group is kind of about comprehensive school counseling programs. I'm just wondering, there's a lot of really valuable and important frameworks out there, and I'm just trying to, like, what are the frameworks that really ground us? And that would be a question for me, is sort of the inner overlap or interplay with the ASCA model.
Yeah, Jennifer, thank you for that. So Oregon's framework for comprehensive school counseling programs, the backbone for that is ASCA national model. And so the way that counseling programs, we know that the way that they operate are through the model, tiered interventions, the equity. I'm trying to think of all the pieces of the model. There is the socio-emotional learning, cell-driven components. And then Grace, what was the fourth part of the model? Sorry, trying to remember.
Trauma-informed, strengths-based, social-emotional learning, and equity-centered.
Thank you. Yeah, so all of those really work well, align well with comprehensive school counseling programs, or vice versa. Like that is the work that we do for comprehensive school counseling programs. And so what we can do is maybe look at even discussing in our next meeting about what does that look like? How do those specifically work together? And I think that might be helpful for you all in your roles. So great question. Thank you. I see some head nods that would be of interest. So is there any other questions?
Kelly put a question in the chat. I think that's definitely food for thought for another session, just roles and responsibilities and workforce and how all of the pieces fit together, because it's really complicated.
I'm going to agree with that. That's kind of what we're struggling with right now, especially with getting some SIA money and getting some new roles as a social workers, community engagement specialists. We're really trying to figure out how coming back in person and hybrid, what our role is. And you talk about tension among admin as far as sometimes they just need an extra body, and how do you navigate that? So any thoughts or help in that area would be appreciative.
Okay, just quickly, and then I've got someone else in my waiting room apparently. We've been having, so others had reached out to us and basically asked the same thing. So we have had some conversations with COSA about the need for supporting districts and leaders and understanding, how do you use this workforce now that they're there? How do you best make sure that they're being supported and not doing lots of recess duty when there are kids that need more services. So thank you for saying that, and we definitely hear you, and we're working on it, and hopefully there will be something that can come out of that, but that's definitely a priority as well.
Grace, thank you for joining us today and answering questions, and we're looking forward to seeing you next month. I will just happy to wrap up with the group if you need to jump off to your next meeting. Also wanted to mention that what was just mentioned is really important when we think about the new law, House Bill 2876 that just passed, and how do we work as school counseling programs as a multidisciplinary teams. I think that's where kind of whose role, who's doing what kind of comes in. There's a lot of question around what does that look like? And I think there's some great resources that can help districts unpack what are the different roles, who implement comprehensive school counseling program, how do they play into that model where they're all bringing their strengths and experience training to be able to implement that. So I think that's a great, there's some, like I said, some great tools that we can discuss that will help define kind of those lanes or those roles for different people. So I just was going to mention, so we are coming to the close of our meeting today, and I know it was so fast and so short. I just felt like it was really important for us to kind of meet each other and get to know each other. So, thank you so much for coming. Our next meeting is going to be March 19th, and that's going to be from 11 to noon. We're going to go in a deeper dive with Grace. And so we're going to really start to go deeper in the model and the toolkit. Also, I want to mention on this Friday, I'm going to send out a doodle poll to try to get our next meeting dates for April, May, and June on the calendar. I know it was really difficult to schedule everyone. And we moved really fast through things today. So I'm going to send out the recording and the PowerPoint slides from today to you also. You'll have those. And then if you have questions, please message me and I'm happy to get back to you. And is there any questions before you all jump off? No? Thank you. Thank you for joining today. It's great to see all of you. So thank you so much.